Here is a quick video just to show you guys how to clean out the Briggs & Stratton plastic carburetors on the newer Briggs & Stratton engines. You can see this is one of the 550EX series engines. There are a couple versions of this engine. Some of them are a little bit smaller, but they're the same idea. Some of them also have a primer on the side. This one has an automatic choke on it. But either way, cleaning them out is basically the same. It's just that on one of them you'll have a choke linkage, and on one of them you will have no choke linkage because it is a primer start. So the first thing that I did was I took off the 3 bolts holding this top piece on. We'll remove the recoil starter just to get it out of the way. You can see the choke linkage running right here. The throttle linkage is down here on top of the carburetor. I took off the 4 bolts that hold this on. You have 2 7mm bolts that bolt directly into the carburetor. And then you have 2 5/16 bolts, one here and one over here. And that just holds the plastic piece to the frame. And then you've got this little breather tube here going into the back of the carburetor, or into the back of the intake manifold. So we're just going to remove that. And there's the carburetor. So we've got that out. I've got all my little bolts put in a safe place. I'm going to pull this off. Notice there's a little O-ring right here and a white ring as well, a white plastic ring. You want to make sure that those two stay in place. That's what seals the air off from getting into the intake behind the carburetor. So now we're going to undo these 2 linkages. Should be pretty easy. See if I can do it one-handed. They just pop out anyway. So there we go. Our carburetor is now free. Now I'll go to the bench and show you how to take that apart. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is take off these 2 bolts on the bottom of the carburetor. I do it with the carburetor sitting in this position because that bowl is full. So if you take off the screws and take the bowl off, it's going to dump a whole lot of gasoline right on you. So we want to keep that gas in the bowl. So if we take these 2 screws off, there we go. That's what holds the bowl in place. Now there is a fairly good size O-ring around this. So you kind of have to pry it off. If you can see, you got to kind of get the screwdriver. I like to put it right here in between this and then give it a little twist. And you'll see that start to come free, and you can get the tip in here. And there we go. Now this one's empty because I already emptied it first. So you can see what's in this carburetor now. So when I had originally opened this up, I dumped the gas out into my little tin here, and I could see that there was a whole bunch of little, almost what looked like little clear beads on the bottom. It almost looks like there's sand or something at the bottom of the bowl. That's what clogs these things up. They sit for a while and they get that, the fuel gels up. So that's what was clogging this. So I wiped the bowl out. I blew it out with some air. This carburetor was not leaking through the needle valve. There was no gas in the oil, so the needle valve is fine. And I mean, you can see how clean this thing looks. Okay, so now that I have the bowl off and everything in here looks clean, everything's wiped out, the next step is to pop this off right here. This little thing will pop right out. It's just a little insert. You got to get a screwdriver under it. Usually I get it right under there, and if I don't slip again, give it a little twist and you can see it start to lift out. So there you go. That's what it is. So now, a little bit of gas up in here, so I dump that out. And I'll probably blow this out with compressed air just to get any excess gas out of it. Make sure there's no junk. So that part's done. Now the next step is this is an E string from a guitar. You can use any kind of tiny piece of wire to do this. And I've got a set of tip cleaners here. You can order those from Amazon. I think I get a lot of my tip cleaners for free. So I clean out all these little holes up here and make sure to clean them really well. There's one up here. See if I can get a larger size into that. And there we go. I don't see anything clogging in these. Those holes are pretty big. You can't really, there's really not a whole lot to do with those. Now this one right here is kind of the main jet. That's probably the most important one. There's a tiny little hole in that. This is the one that I start with just a tiny piece of wire, in this case a guitar string. And I could actually feel that that was clogged. I could feel it poke through, and I couldn't even see the hole when I first started, so clean that out real good. See if I can go up to the smallest size on my cleaner here. Put that in there. So that's looking pretty good. I'll blow it all out with compressed air, make sure I don't leave anything behind to reclog it. So that's all nice and clean. When you put this back in now, this can only go in one way. We put it right back in just the way we started. Push it in so it's nice and tight. This right here, you'll see has an indent in it. That only goes in one way as well, because the little indent has to cover over this protrusion. So we'll get that lined up with the holes. And now I'm just going to put these two little screws back in where they came from, tighten them down nice, and then go reinstall the carburetor. So now I'm going to pop the carburetor right back on. I'm going to put my my throttle linkage right back into the top hole here. I'll put my choke linkage right into the hole for the choke. Sometimes it's a little easier said than done. There we go. So that's in there. So now I just need to, sorry, my finger's in the way there. Slide this right in. You can see this little fuel line nub goes underneath the metal bracket. This slides right in over that O-ring and the little plastic ring that we saw at the beginning. And that's in. So now, I forgot to show you this when I first did this, but I had already clamped and disconnected the fuel line. So now my next step is going to be to put the fuel line back on. And then I'll put this back on, making sure that I put the breather back onto that little nipple there. And then I'll put the 4 screws back in. And then I'll put this back on and put the 3 screws in that hold the recoil on. So I'll do that off camera, and then we'll see if it starts. Okay, so now we're going to give it a start. Everything's put back together. See if I can hold this and do this at the same time. Puff of blue smoke that you saw come out was just oil that had gotten into the exhaust, most likely from transporting it over to the shop. A lot of people put it in their cars. They end up tipped over. Oil leaks into the exhaust. It could also be just from me tipping it up a couple times when I had to do the carburetor. So when they do that, I just put a clamp on the handle and I'll let it run outside for about 5 minutes. It'll burn that off, so when the customer gets it, it's not blowing out smoke. Otherwise, I'd get a call back in the morning about it. So that's how you clean out one of these Briggs plastic carburetors. You'll see those all the time because the holes are so small, they clog very easily.